The crystalline halls of the Confederation flagship Eternal Harmony sparkled with an almost painful brilliance as Admiral Sarah Chen walked between towering alien delegates. Their bodies, ranging from vaguely humanoid to utterly bizarre, created a living corridor that rippled with bioluminescence. Under different circumstances, she might have marveled at the diversity of sentient life surrounding her. Instead, her attention focused on the subtle shifts in their postures as she passed. 20 years of combat experience had taught her to read body language across species. The Arcanian delegate's fourth arm was twitching, a sign of stress she'd noted in their briefing materials. The Malaxi representative's chromatophores were cycling through warning colors. Most telling was the way the Zinfar Elder's sensory stalks kept angling away from her, as if detecting something offensive. "Please, Admiral Chen," the Confederation's chief mediator Vexel gestured with 3 of his tentacle limbs toward an ornate dais. "Take your position for the neural synchronization ceremony. This is merely a formality before welcoming humanity into our peaceful coalition." Sarah noted how he emphasized the word peaceful. Her hand instinctively wanted to drift toward the ceremonial sidearm at her hip, a gesture trained into her during the resource wars. She forced it still. The dais hummed to life as she stepped onto it, bathing her in soft blue light. The assembled delegates linked appendages, forming a circuit of consciousness that would allow surface-level telepathic communion. It was meant to be a gesture of trust and transparency. The moment their minds touched hers, the chamber erupted in psychic chaos. The Arcanian delegate physically recoiled, their crystalline exoskeleton chiming in distress. The Malaxi's skin turned ash-gray. The Zinfar Elder began emanating waves of fear pheromones. Sarah knew what they were seeing. Her neural patterns were a battlefield map of humanity's history. Every human carried echoes of their species' violent past encoded in their genes. The cunning of pack hunters, the aggression of tribal warfare, the calculated brutality of modern combat. Her military training had honed those ancient instincts into razor-sharp tactical algorithms that must seem utterly alien to species that had evolved past warfare millennia ago. By the eternal. Vexol's tentacles coiled in horror. Your kind still maintains active combat neural pathways. You actually train them. Strengthen them. Your entire species carries dormant predator responses. We call it being prepared, Sarah replied carefully, noting how the honor guard's ceremonial staves were shifting into more practical positions, not just decorative after all. The psychic link was still active. She caught fragments of their panic. Evolutionary aberration. Cannot be allowed to spread. Containment protocols. Immediate action required. Sarah kept her expression neutral as her neural implant transmitted a coded burst transmission to the human diplomatic vessel waiting outside. 3 pulses, 2 long, 1 short. Total compromise. Hostile intent. Prepare for immediate action. "I think," she said slowly, keeping the delegate's attention focused on her, "there's been a misunderstanding about humanity's role in the galaxy." "No misunderstanding." Vexol's voice had lost its diplomatic smoothness. "We have seen the truth of your species. You are too dangerous to join galactic society. The evolutionary path you represent cannot be allowed to contaminate." The chamber's artificial gravity hiccupped as the human diplomatic vessel engaged its quantum fold drive. Sarah smiled. Knowing her people were already executing contingency plans, she prepared the moment she'd read the first anthropological reports about the Confederation's perfect peace. "You're right about one thing," she said as warning klaxons began to howl through the flagship. "You've seen the truth about humanity. We come from a harsh world that taught us harsh lessons. We carry the wisdom of countless battles in our blood. And right now, you're about to learn why that makes us very, very dangerous to underestimate." The lights flickered as the first explosive charges detonated inside the flagship's engineering section. Right on schedule. The Confederation's tactical display showed Earth's fleet as a scatter of red dots against the void. To first strategist Kelvorn of the Zinfar, their formation appeared desperately random, like prey animals scattering before a predator. His species' millennia of strategic simulation had taught him that such chaos indicated imminent defeat. Their ships divide themselves. He mused, sensory stalks wavering in confusion. They accept tactical isolation. This confirms our analysis. They are irrational, dangerous. Containment is necessary. The massive view screen showed Earth's fleet splitting into ever smaller groups, none larger than 5 vessels. The Confederation's tactical AI calculated a 99.8% chance of victory. Their containment fleet outnumbered the humans 15-1, with superior technology and perfect formation. That's when Admiral Chen's voice cut through their command channel, breaking through their best encryption as if it hadn't existed. I read a fascinating bit of Confederation military history during my diplomatic preparations. You haven't lost a ship in combat for 3,000 years. Let's change that. The first human squadron slammed into the Confederation's forward screen at speeds that their tactical computers classified as suicidal. The humans had overcharged their reactor cores, turning their ships into artificial comets wreathed in plasma. 2 Confederation cruisers evaporated in the collision. Impossible. Kelvorn's exoskeleton rattled in distress. They sacrificed their own vessels, their own lives. There is no logic. Redirect shields to forward quadrant, his executive officer interrupted. Multiple human squadrons on collision. The tactical display erupted in chaos. Each human squadron had picked a different attack vector, each one executing what the Confederation's AI labeled as mathematically obsolete maneuvers. Ships corkscrewed through space, using their own debris as shields, deliberately flying into weapons fire to open holes in Confederation formations. They're not even trying to survive, whispered a junior officer, their tentacles curling in horror. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't fear death? Admiral Chen's voice crackled through their comms again. Here's a lesson from Earth's military history. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn to take the queen. The tactical display showed 40% of Earth's fleet destroyed or crippled. But the Confederation's carefully planned containment strategy lay in ruins. Their ships, trained to fight in perfect geometric patterns, couldn't adapt to an enemy that ignored every rule of space combat. Fall back to secondary containment positions. Kelvorn ordered, his voice shaking. Recalculate approach vectors. Sir. His sensor officer's chromatophores flashed emergency colors. The human vessels. They're not destroyed. The crews. They're abandoning their crippled ships. The tactical display updated, showing hundreds of tiny escape pods launching from the broken human vessels. Each pod was on a trajectory toward a different Confederation ship. They wouldn't, Kelvorn started, but he knew that wasn't true. These humans would absolutely attempt something so insane. All ships repel boarders. He commanded, but it was too late. The escape pods weren't just carrying survivors. They were packed with Marines in powered armor. The Confederation's internal security forces, trained for parade ground ceremonies and crowd control, found themselves facing creatures whose ancestors had perfected the art of close-quarters combat before they'd invented writing. Admiral Chen's final transmission came as Kelvorn watched his perfect fleet dissolve into chaos. You thought our ships were our weapons. Wrong. Our ships are just delivery systems. Human beings are the real weapons, and we've had a lot more practice at this than you have. As the sounds of combat echoed through his flagship's corridors, Kelvorn finally understood. The Confederation had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of bloodless victory. Humanity had spent 300,000 years perfecting the art of warfare itself. They hadn't even seen the real battle begin. The last thing he saw before his bridge blast doors buckled was a human Marine's helmet cam footage being broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Scenes of Earth's historical battles playing on an endless loop, a psychological weapon that struck deeper than any plasma torpedo. The Confederation was about to learn why peace through strength required actually remembering how to be strong. Grand Admiral Nexus 7 of the Confederation stared at the tactical display with all 4 of his optical clusters, refusing to believe what he was seeing. The Confederation's response fleet, the largest assemblage of military might in galactic history, was being systematically dismantled by mining equipment. Another dreadnought lost in Sector 7. His tactical officer reported, voice modulator crackling with stress. Cause of destruction: converted mining laser from a human ore extraction vessel. The display showed the brutal reality. Human mining ships, their industrial cutting beams modified far beyond safety protocols, were slicing through the Confederation's most advanced warships like scrap metal. The dreadnought's adaptive shielding, designed to withstand military-grade weapons, had no preset configurations for mining equipment. They're using industrial drilling platforms as weapons, another officer added, their crystalline form vibrating with disbelief. The humans mount them on high-speed drone frames. Our hulls are rated for energy weapons, not diamond-tipped industrial drills spinning at relativistic speeds. A new alert flashed across the display. The humans were broadcasting again, but not military communications. They were transmitting something called memes across all frequencies, crude animations mocking the Confederation's rigid tactics, showing their mighty dreadnoughts being taken apart by what amounted to space construction equipment. Stop those transmissions, Nexus 7 ordered. They're affecting fleet morale. Too late. The human broadcast had already reached the telepathically linked crew networks. The Confederation's warships had never faced ridicule before. Their crews, linked in group mind formations, were experiencing collective embarrassment for the first time in their species' history. New contact. The sensor officer's alert cut through the chaos. Massive debris field approaching at combat velocity. The tactical display zoomed in on the threat. Nexus 7's optical clusters widened in horror. It wasn't a debris field. It was a swarm of cargo containers, each one stripped down and packed with mining explosives normally used for breaking up asteroids. The containers were painted with crude smiling faces and phrases like special delivery and handle with care. Evasive action, Nexus 7 commanded, but the massive Confederation ships, designed for formation combat, couldn't maneuver quickly enough. The cargo containers slammed into their ranks, their industrial-grade explosives creating chain reactions in ship after ship. Admiral Chen is transmitting again, the comm officer reported reluctantly. Let's hear it, Nexus 7 said, knowing he couldn't stop the broadcast anyway. Impressive fleet you've got there. Chen's voice carried a hint of amusement. Very pretty. But while you were perfecting your military precision, we were learning to improvise. Every human ship is a potential weapon. Every tool can be repurposed. We turned an entire planet's resources toward survival. Did you really think we'd stop just because we reached space? As if to emphasize her point, a squadron of human ships appeared from behind a stellar dust cloud. They were civilian vessels, pleasure yachts converted into Q-ship weapon platforms. Their luxurious hulls concealed military-grade weaponry in what should have been entertainment spaces. The Confederation's tactical eye was suffering cascade failures trying to categorize the threats. It couldn't predict attacks that violated every principle of its military doctrine. Civilian ships weren't supposed to have weapon signatures. Mining tools weren't supposed to be used as anti-ship weapons. Cargo containers weren't supposed to be kinetic bombs. You know what your problem is. Chen's voice continued. You forgot that every technology humans create gets tested in warfare sooner or later. These mining lasers, we designed them knowing they might need to be weapons. Those cargo containers, built tough enough to survive combat, because we learned that lesson the hard way. Even our civilian ships have military-grade power systems, because we never forgot what it means to be ready for anything. Nexus 7 watched as another wing of his fleet fell into disarray, their perfect formation broken by what appeared to be modified agricultural drones, spreading clouds of reactive metals that fouled sensor systems and clogged engine intakes. The humans hadn't just prepared for war. They'd turned their entire civilization into a weapon system waiting to be activated. And the Confederation was learning this lesson far too late to matter. Supreme Commander SciFi of the combined Confederation forces felt something alien crawl through their neural pathways. Confidence. After 3 devastating encounters with human forces, they had finally decoded the patterns of human warfare. Their fleet of 10,000 ships moved through space in mathematically perfect formations, ready to end this conflict with overwhelming force. All ships maintained convergence pattern theta. SciFi broadcasted through the fleet's hive mind. The humans have exhausted their unconventional tactics. Now they faced the full might of unified Confederation warfare. The tactical display showed Earth's solar system ahead, a gravitational maze of planets, moons, and asteroids. Their simulation computers had mapped every possible hiding place for human vessels, every potential ambush point. This time, there would be no surprises. "Sir," his sensor officer interrupted, "we're detecting unusual debris patterns in the asteroid belt. Configuration is irregular." SciFi's tendrils waved dismissively. "Debris is irrelevant. Our shields can." The first marbles hit their forward elements at 0.15 C. Not military ordnance, not modified mining charges, not repurposed civilian equipment. Just marbles. Billions of simple silicon spheres, mass-produced in automated factories and scattered throughout the asteroid belt. Their small size and seemingly random distribution had fooled the Confederation's threat assessment systems. Impossible. SciFi watched as their forward screens, designed to repel energy weapons and kinetic missiles, were penetrated by clouds of glass balls moving at relativistic speeds. They turned the entire asteroid belt into a giant shotgun. Admiral Chen's voice cut in, riding the same frequencies as a barrage of new human transmissions. Children's videos showing marble games, ancient military footage of grapeshot cannons, physics lectures on kinetic energy calculations. The Confederation's perfect formation began to break apart as ships tried to evade the marble storm. But the humans had calculated their approach vectors perfectly. Every evasive maneuver just led to new clouds of supersonic glass spheres. "Do you know why we chose marbles?" Chen asked conversationally as another wave of Confederation ships reported critical hull breaches. "Because every human child plays with them. We understand intuitively how they scatter, how they ricochet. Your tactical computers are still trying to calculate the chaos of 1,000,000 billion bouncing balls, but any human could have told you what would happen." The human transmissions continued, showing Confederation ships being shredded by children's toys, their movements set to upbeat musical scores. The telepathically linked crew networks began experiencing something unprecedented: humiliation. "Exit vector calculated," SciFi's navigation officer announced. "We can retreat to." "About that," Chen interrupted. "While you were focused on the marbles, we've been busy with the rest of our childhood toy box." New contacts appeared on the tactical display. The humans had used the chaos of the marble field to position their fleet in a 3-dimensional sphere around the Confederation forces. But they weren't firing weapons. Instead, they were deploying what appeared to be string. "Monofilament wire," Chen explained cheerfully. "Inspired by another playground game, Cat's Cradle. Except our version is atomic with carbon fiber moving at significant fractions of light speed. I'd suggest not trying to fly through it." The Confederation fleet was trapped in a giant's game of string figures, their escape vectors cut off by nets of invisible wire that could slice through battleship armor like tissue paper. Every attempt to blast their way free just created new patterns of lethal filaments. "Your civilization has achieved amazing things." Chen's voice had lost its humor. "But you forgot something fundamental about intelligence. It's born from play. Human children learn warfare through games, learn physics through toys, learn strategy through sports. Every human invention, no matter how simple, contains the seeds of a weapon because that's how our minds work. We see the deadly potential in everything because we had to survive our own history." SciFi watched their mighty fleet, pride of 15 species military tradition, being systematically dismantled by playground equipment. And in that moment, they realized that the Confederation had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't just underestimated humanity's military prowess, they'd underestimated the military potential of everything humans had ever created. The Orion Nebula blazed ahead of the Confederation pursuit fleet, its swirling gases illuminated by the light of newborn stars. Strategic Intelligence Director Val Shera watched the human ships dive into that cosmic maelstrom, their engines leaving trails like comets against the stellar nursery's backdrop. "They're protecting something in there," she announced to her command staff. Admiral Chen wouldn't risk her remaining forces without good reason. The supply lines they're defending must be crucial to Earth's war effort. The human fleet's movements did suggest desperation. Their ships were taking damage from the nebula's radiation storms, their shields flickering under the assault of stellar winds and magnetic turbulence. According to every tactical simulation, this was finally the end of humanity's resistance. "All ships, combat formation," Val Shera ordered. "Today we proved that chaos cannot defeat perfect order." The Confederation fleet advanced in geometric precision, their formations optimized by millennia of strategic algorithms. Each ship knew its exact position, its role, its purpose. This was how advanced civilizations conducted warfare, with certainty, with precision. A human destroyer suddenly rode a radiation wave like a surfboard. It told, screaming under the stress as it carved through the nebula's charged gases. The energy weight behind it amplified its weapon systems far beyond their normal output, transforming a glancing blow into a killing stroke that split a Confederation cruiser in two. Impossible. Val Shera's sensory tendrils coiled in shock. They're using the nebula's energy patterns to go surfing. The human transmission cut through their command channels, carrying the voice of a junior officer whose excitement bordered on manic. "Did you know the Orion Nebula's radiation storms follow predictable wave patterns, just like the ocean back home? Once you get the rhythm down, it's just like hitting the beaches at Maui." More human ships began emerging from the nebula's depths, each riding different energy waves, using the natural phenomena to enhance their capabilities in ways the Confederation's computers insisted were physically impossible. Their vessels moved like sea creatures in their natural environment, despite the lethal conditions. "Reform the line," Val Shera ordered, but her ships were already scattering. The humans had turned the nebula itself into a weapon, using its radiation to mask their approach vectors, riding its magnetic fields to execute impossible maneuvers, diving into gas clouds that should have melted their hulls. A massive radiation surge approached the Confederation fleet. Their sensors classified it as lethal, causing automated systems to begin emergency evasive protocols. But the humans flew straight into it. "What are they doing?" Val Shera demanded. "Those radiation levels will." The human ships emerged from the surge transformed, their hulls glowing with absorbed energy. They had somehow converted the nebula's deadly radiation into temporary weapon amplification, their next volley carrying the power of a small sun. "The thing about evolution," Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos, "is that it teaches species to use their environment. Earth's oceans taught us how to read wave patterns. Our storms taught us to harness wild energy. Our predators taught us to turn natural threats into advantages. This nebula, it's just another wilderness to adapt to." Val Shera watched in horror as her perfect formation dissolved. Some ships were caught in the nebula's currents, others were being picked off by humans who seemed to materialize from the very gases around them. The humans weren't just surviving in this deadly environment, they were thriving in it. "Your ships are beautiful," Chen continued, almost gentle now. "Perfect expressions of advanced engineering. But nature doesn't care about perfection. Nature rewards adaptation. And humans, we're the most adaptable species you've ever encountered. We don't just survive hostile environments. We learn to weaponize them." As if to punctuate her point, a human cruiser dove into a particularly dense gas cloud, using its electromagnetic properties to temporarily cloak itself before emerging behind a Confederation dreadnought. The killing shot was almost an afterthought. The nebula flared again, and in its light, Val-Shera finally understood. They weren't fighting ships or weapons or tactics. They were fighting 3 billion years of evolutionary history that had taught humanity to turn every environment into a battlefield. Within the depths of the Orion Nebula, the Confederation's battle coordinator, Arxtal, watched his tactical display transform into something primordial. The human ships had abandoned all pretense of traditional space combat formation. Instead, they moved in patterns his combat computer couldn't classify, until he loaded Earth's biological archives. "They're hunting us," he whispered, his crystalline form vibrating with the revelation. These movements, they mirror predator pack behaviors. The human fleet had split into groups of 3 to 5 ships, each adopting roles that prehistoric Earth hunters had perfected millennia ago. Some ships acted as harassers, drawing Confederation vessels out of formation. Others played the part of flankers, cutting off escape routes. The rest waited in the nebula's dark regions, ready to strike like ambush predators. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "the human vessels are emitting low-frequency energy patterns that are disrupting our neural networks." The signatures match recorded patterns of Earth wolf packs coordinating hunts. Through the command viewport, Arxtal watched a human squadron execute a maneuver that his tactical computer labeled as impossible. 3 ships curved through space in perfect coordination, using the nebula's gravitational eddies to slingshot around a Confederation cruiser. The attack pattern exactly matched how velociraptors had once cornered larger prey. "Their neural patterns are shifting," the SciTech officer announced, her tendrils writhing in distress. Human brain activity is synchronizing with ancient hunting rhythms encoded in their genetic memory. They're not thinking like soldiers anymore. They're thinking like apex predators. Admiral Chen's voice cut in, accompanied by data streams showing Earth's evolutionary history. "Did you know that humans are one of the few species that can run prey to exhaustion? We didn't always have weapons. Sometimes we just chased our food until it collapsed. We're doing the same thing now, wearing down your perfect formations, waiting for mistakes." A Confederation dreadnought tried to break away from the hunting packs, its captain attempting a traditional evasive pattern. 3 human ships immediately moved to cut it off, their trajectories mirroring exactly how lions would separate a wildebeest from its herd. "Your tactics are admirable," Chen continued as the dreadnought's crew surrendered. Their neural networks overwhelmed by predator-prey instincts they'd evolved past eons ago. But they're designed by beings who forgot what it means to hunt. Every human carries the memory of the hunt in their DNA. Even our children play chase games that mimic predator and prey behaviors. Arxtal watched his fleet's perfect geometric formations crumble as primal terror overtook the linked crew minds. The humans were broadcasting on frequencies that triggered deep genetic memories in the Confederation species, memories of being prey, of being hunted, of running from shadows in the dark. "Fascinating readings from your ships," Chen added, her voice carrying an edge that raised Arxtal's crystalline hackles. "Your crews are experiencing an adrenal response that your species hasn't displayed in 10,000 generations. We've awakened something primitive in you, the memory of what it means to be hunted." A new wave of human ships emerged from a particularly dense gas cloud, moving in formations that mimicked hunting sharks. Their energy signatures pulsed in patterns that Earth's apex predators had used to coordinate pack kills since before humans walked upright. "Combat isn't just about technology or tactics," Chen explained as another Confederation squadron fell to the hunting patterns. "It's about understanding the fundamental nature of conflict. And humans, we never forgot what we learned in Earth's ancient savannas. Every strategy we use in space was first written in blood on our homeworld's battlefields." Arxtal's tactical display showed his fleet being systematically dismantled by maneuvers that belonged more in a nature documentary than a space battle. The humans had turned the nebula into their hunting ground, using stellar phenomena as natural cover just as their ancestors had used terrain features in prehistoric hunts. Nature's 4 billion years of combat evolution had met sterile military doctrine. And nature, red in tooth and claw, was winning. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez stared at her damaged sensor display aboard the destroyer Thunderchild, watching strange patterns flicker across the screen. The nebula's energy storms had fried half their systems, leaving them with barely functional equipment that the Confederation would consider primitive. But Maya saw something in the static that reminded her of music. "Sir," she called to her captain, "I'm detecting harmonic patterns in the nebula's storm pulses. They're not random. They're cyclical, like a heartbeat." Captain Chen's voice crackled through the fleet-wide channel. "Stay in formation, Lieutenant. We can't risk breaking pattern now that we've got them rattled." Maya's fingers danced across her console, mapping the energy pulses. Her childhood spent playing piano had taught her to recognize rhythms others might miss. The nebula wasn't just a cosmic storm. It was conducting an orchestra of quantum reactions. "With respect, Admiral," Maya keyed her comm, "breaking protocol. We're thinking too conventionally. These pulses, they're like standing waves. If we time our attacks to match the nebula's natural rhythm." Lieutenant Rodriguez, her immediate superior, cut in. "Return to your assigned duties and maintain formation. This is not the time for—" Maya killed the comm and turned to her bridge crew. "Who here played music in school?" A dozen hands went up. "Perfect." Musicians understood timing in their bones. "Plot me an attack vector that syncs with the nebula's pulse rate," she ordered. "Like keeping time with a metronome, but with plasma torpedoes." Her squadron commanders started to object, but Maya was already moving. The Thunderchild broke formation, her engines pulsing in time with the nebula's quantum fluctuations. Each burst of power amplified the natural energy waves, building like a crescendo. "Rodriguez," Admiral Chen's voice carried equal parts fury and fascination. "What the hell are you?" The Thunderchild fired, her weapons perfectly synchronized with a massive energy surge. The result defied physics as the Confederation understood it. The nebula's natural harmonics amplified the attack 100-fold, creating a cascade of quantum reactions that rippled through space like a stone thrown into a pond. A section of the nebula literally tore apart, creating a momentary rift that bypassed the Confederation's defensive screens completely. Ships that had survived every conventional attack found themselves being shredded by the fabric of space itself. "All ships," Maya broadcasted, sending her calculations fleet-wide. "Match your attack timing to the nebula's pulse rate. Treat it like a symphony. We're not fighting the storm, we're conducting it." The human fleet responded with the adaptability that had kept their species alive through countless crises. Ships began firing in synchronized patterns, each shot timed to the nebula's natural rhythm. The result transformed space combat into a deadly dance, with quantum harmonics as the music. Impossible. The Confederation commander's transmission carried pure disbelief. "You cannot simply ignore the laws of physics." "We're not ignoring them," Maya responded, her ship diving through another precisely timed rift. "We're dancing with them. The universe has rhythms. Humans have spent our entire existence learning to move with natural rhythms, through music, through dance, through combat. This is just a bigger dance floor." The battle transformed into something unprecedented. Human ships moved through space like dancers interpreting a cosmic symphony, each maneuver timed to the nebula's pulse, each attack amplified by natural harmonics that the Confederation's computers couldn't predict. "Now this," Admiral Chen's voice carried pride. "This is why humanity survived everything our world threw at us. Not just because we're adaptable, not just because we're predators, but because we see patterns where others see chaos." Lieutenant Rodriguez just turned a stellar phenomenon into a weapon because she played piano as a kid. Maya watched as her innovation rippled through the human fleet. Each crew added their own interpretation to the nebula's symphony: percussion specialists, timing torpedo spreads to subsonic pulses, former dancers predicting energy wave patterns through intuition born of movement. The Confederation's perfect formation shattered against an enemy that had turned physics itself into an ally. They had expected humanity's physical weapons. They weren't prepared for a species that could weaponize the very music of the spheres. The Grand Council chamber of the Confederation sparkled with crystalline light as Admiral Sarah Chen stood before representatives of 15 species, the same chamber where, weeks earlier, they had detected her species' dangerous neural patterns now hosted a very different kind of meeting. The human victory was complete. First Speaker Vexel announced, their tentacles moving in patterns of formal submission. But more concerning than our defeat is what it revealed about our civilization's vulnerabilities. The assembled delegates watched as holographic displays showed the battle footage. Human ships surfing radiation waves, improvised weapons tearing through perfect formations, converted civilian vessels overwhelming military hardware, and finally, Lieutenant Rodriguez conducting her symphony of quantum destruction. In 10 days of combat, Vexel continued, humanity demonstrated more tactical innovation than our civilization has produced in 3,000 years of peace. This is both terrifying and necessary. Chen stood quietly, noting how the delegates' postures had changed. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into something closer to revelation. The Zinthar elder, whose sensory stalks had recoiled from her before, now leaned forward with obvious fascination. We thought we had achieved perfect peace, Strategic Director Val Shera spoke up. Instead, we had achieved perfect stagnation. Our military doctrine was flawless against known threats, but the galaxy is infinite and unknown threats are inevitable. You're not here to surrender, Chen said, breaking protocol. You're here to hire us. The chamber erupted in harmonic tones of agreement. The holographic displays shifted to show new threats, long-range scans of unknown objects approaching from intergalactic space, quantum anomalies that defied conventional physics, dark matter formations that shouldn't exist. Your species carries within it something we lost, Vexel admitted. The capacity to face the unprecedented, to adapt not just physically, but culturally and tactically. You turn toys into weapons, music into warfare, and natural disasters into advantages. More than that, Battle Coordinator Extal added, their crystalline form shimming with emphasis. You understand conflict at a fundamental level. Where we see disorder, you see patterns. Where we see obstacles, you see opportunities. Your neural architecture, which we found so disturbing, is precisely what the galaxy needs. Chen smiled. You want us to reform your military doctrine. We want you to teach us how to survive. Val Shera's words carried the weight of 15 species' futures. The Confederation achieved peace by forgetting violence. But in doing so, we forgot how to defend that peace. Humanity remembers. You carry the wisdom of countless battles in your genes, the innovation born of desperate survival, the strength that comes from never forgetting what it means to fight. The chamber's displays showed new designs, hybrid ships incorporating human tactical flexibility with Confederation technology, training programs merging Earth's combat experience with alien capabilities, defensive systems that learn from humanity's improvisational genius. There will be conditions, Chen stated firmly. Earth maintains its autonomy. We won't disarm or evolve past our violent tendencies. We are what we are, the galaxy's apex predators, its survivors, its guardians. Agreed, Vexel's tentacles formed the sign of absolute commitment. The Confederation needs predators to protect the flock. We need warriors who remember war, hunters who understand the hunt, survivors who know the cost of survival. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with patterns that reminded Chen of Lieutenant Rodriguez's quantum symphony. The same chaos that had horrified them weeks ago now represented hope. Hope that when unknown threats emerged from the dark between galaxies, civilization would have champions who remembered how to fight. Then let's begin, Chen said, calling up displays of Earth's military history. Lesson 1. True strength isn't about having the biggest guns or the perfect formation. It's about understanding that everything is a potential weapon. Every disadvantage can become an advantage, and the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the sharpest teeth. It's the one that never stops learning new ways to hunt. The Confederation delegates leaned forward, their species' ancient prey instincts finally understanding a fundamental truth. Sometimes you need monsters to fight monsters. And humanity. They were the best monsters evolution had ever produced. Monsters who could think, adapt, create, and most importantly, choose what to protect. The galaxy's greatest warriors were about to become its greatest teachers.